Dagny burst out laughing. She could not stop herself. She could not resist it. She could not reject a moment's chance to avenge Ellis Wyatt, Andrew Stockton, Lawrence Hammond, all the others. She said, torn by laughter, "Thanks, Mr. Weatherby." Mr. Weatherby looked at her in astonishment. "Yes?" he asked coldly. "I knew that we would have to pay for those bonds one way or another. We're paying." "Miss Taggart," said the chairman severely, "don't you think that I told you so's are futile? To talk of what would have happened if we had acted differently is nothing but purely theoretical speculation. We cannot indulge in theory. We have to deal with the practical reality of the moment." "Right," said Mr. Weatherby. "That's what you ought to be, practical. Now we offer you a trade. You do something for us, and we'll do something for you. You give the unions their wage raises, and we'll give you permission to close the Rio Norte line." "All right," said James Taggart. His voice choked. Standing at the window, she heard them vote on their decision. She heard them declare that the John Galt line would end in 6 weeks, on March 31st. It's only a matter of getting through the next few moments, she thought. Take care of the next few moments, and then the next, a few at a time. And after a while it will be easier. You'll get over it after a while. The assignment she gave herself for the next few moments was to put on her coat and be first to leave the room. Then there was the assignment of riding in an elevator down the great silent length of the Taggart building. Then there was the assignment of crossing the dark lobby. Halfway through the lobby she stopped. A man stood leaning against the wall in a manner of purposeful waiting, and it was she who was his purpose, because he was looking straight at her. She did not recognize him at once, because she felt certain that the face she saw could not possibly be there in that lobby at this hour. "Hi, Slug," he said softly. She answered, groping for some great distance that had once been hers. "Hi, Frisco. Have they finally murdered John Galt?" She struggled to place the moment into some orderly sequence of time. The question belonged to the present, but the solemn face came from those days on the hill by the Hudson, when he would have understood all that the question meant to her. "How did you know that they'd do it tonight?" she asked. "It's been obvious for months that that would be the next step at their next meeting. Why did you come here?" "To see how you'd take it." "Want to laugh about it?" "No, Dagny. I don't want to laugh about it." She saw no hint of amusement in his face. She answered trustingly, "I don't know how I'm taking it." "I do. I was expecting it. I knew they'd have to do it, so now it's only a matter of getting through." "Tonight," she wanted to say, but said, "all the work and details." He took her arm. "Let's go someplace where we can have a drink together." "Francisco, why don't you laugh at me? You've always laughed about that line." "I will. Tomorrow when I see you going on with all the work and details. Not tonight." "Why not?" "Come on. You're in no condition to talk about it." She wanted to protest, but said, "No, I guess I'm not." He led her out to the street, and she found herself walking silently in time with the steady rhythm of his steps, the grasp of his fingers on her arm, unstressed and firm. He signaled a passing taxicab and held the door open for her. She obeyed him without questions. She felt relief, like a swimmer who stops struggling. The spectacle of a man acting with assurance was a life-belt thrown to her at a moment when she had forgotten the hope of its existence. The relief was not in the surrender of responsibility, but in the sight of a man able to assume it. "Dagny," he said, looking at the city as it moved past their taxi window. "Think of the first man who thought of making a steel girder. He knew what he saw, what he thought, and what he wanted. He did not say, it seems to me, and he did not take orders from those who say, in my opinion." She chuckled, wondering at his accuracy. He had guessed the nature of the sickening sense that held her, the sense of a swamp which she had to escape. "Look around you," he said. "A city is the frozen shape of human courage, the courage of those men who thought for the first time of every bolt, rivet, and power generator that went to make it. the courage to say, not it seems to me, but it is, and to stake one's life on one's judgment. You're not alone. Those men exist. They have always existed. There was a time when human beings crouched in caves at the mercy of any pestilence and any storm. Could men such as those on your board of directors have brought them out of the cave and up to this? He pointed at the city. God, no. Then there's your proof that another kind of men do exist. Yes, she said avidly. Yes, think of them, and forget your board of directors. Francisco, where are they now? The other kind of men? Now they're not wanted. I want them? Oh, God, how I want them! When you do, you'll find them. He did not question her about the John Galt line, and she did not speak of it, until they sat at a table in a dimly lighted booth, and she saw the stem of a glass between her fingers. She had barely noticed how they had come here. It was a quiet, costly place that looked like a secret retreat. She saw a small, lustrous table under her hand, the leather of a circular seat behind her shoulders, and a niche of dark blue mirror that cut them off from the sight of whatever enjoyment or pain others had come here to hide. Francisco was leaning against the table watching her, and she felt as if she were leaning against the steady attentiveness of his eyes. They did not speak of the line, but she said suddenly, looking down at the liquid in her glass, I'm thinking of the night when Nat Taggart was told that he had to abandon the bridge he was building, the bridge across the Mississippi. He had been desperately short of money because people were afraid of the bridge. They called it an impractical venture. That morning he was told that the river steamboat concerns had filed suit against him, demanding that his bridge be destroyed as a threat to the public welfare. There were 3 spans of the bridge built, advancing across the river. That same day a local mob attacked the structure and set fire to the wooden scaffolding. His workers deserted him, some because they were scared, some because they were bribed by the steamboat people, and most of them because he had had no money to pay them for weeks. Throughout that day he kept receiving word that men who had subscribed to buy the stock of the Taggart Transcontinental Railroad were canceling their subscriptions one after another. Toward evening a committee representing 2 banks that were his last hope of support came to see him. It was right there, on the construction site by the river, in the old railway coach where he lived, with the door open to the view of the blackened ruin, with the wooden remnants still smoking over the twisted steel. He had negotiated a loan from those banks, but the contract had not been signed. The committee told him that he would have to give up his bridge, because he was certain to lose the suit, and the bridge would be ordered torn down by the time he completed it. If he was willing to give it up, they said, and to ferry his passengers across the river on barges, as other railroads were doing, the contract would stand, and he would get the money to continue his line west on the other shore. If not, then the loan was off. What was his answer, they asked. He did not say a word. He picked up the contract, tore it across, handed it to them, and walked out. He walked to the bridge, along the spans, down to the last girder. He knelt. He picked up the tools his men had left, and he started to clear the charred wreckage away from the steel structure. His chief engineer saw him there, axe in hand, alone over the wide river with the sun setting behind him in that west where his line was to go. He worked there all night. By morning he had thought out a plan of what he would do to find the right men, the men of independent judgment, to find them, to convince them, to raise the money, to continue the bridge. She spoke in a low, flat voice, looking down at the spot of light that shimmered in the liquid as her fingers turned the stem of her glass once in a while. She showed no emotion, but her voice had the intense monotone of a prayer. Francisco, if he could live through that night, what right have I to complain? What does it matter how I feel just now? He built that bridge. I have to hold it for him. I can't let it go the way of the bridge of the Atlantic Southern. I feel almost as if he'd know it if I let that happen. He'd know it that night when he was alone over the river. No, that's nonsense, but here's what I feel. Any man who knows what Nat Taggart felt that night, any man living now and capable of knowing it, it's him that I would betray if I let it happen, and I can't. Dagny, if Nat Taggart were living now, what would he do? She answered involuntarily with a swift, bitter chuckle. He wouldn't last a minute. Then corrected herself. No, he would. He would find a way to fight them. How? I don't know.